Hi! Whatever you call this, an embossing gun, a heat tool, or something else, what we know is it performs magic when it melts the embossing powder for our handmade cards. But did you know there's also a practical use for it? Well, I'm going to share that with you with my embossing heat tool tip. My embossing heat tool tip is one you'll use in the craft room and other rooms. I'm Shelley Godby, the owner and CEO of Stamping Smiles, and for 18 years I've been teaching others how to create their own hand-stamped smiles. Why my husband found this practical tip to be so useful, he kept borrowing it, so I finally bought him his own. The heat tool or embossing gun, well, we use this to create magic. And so what I have here is a flower stamped in, sprinkled on copper embossing powder. And so we will put this to the second setting and then hold it until we see it go from that powdery to shiny. And then once it gets going, look at that. Keep your fingers out of the way. The heat is really intense. And then look at that. Oh my goodness, just gorgeous. So this is what we think of when we think of a heat tool or embossing gun. Another use for it is with the Stampin' Up! Heat tool, there are two settings. That first setting is to dry ink. Sometimes you just want to move on quicker, and that second one is the more intense for the embossing we just did. Well, and it's worth every penny to do gorgeous things like this. But one day in a class I discovered we used, remember that red line adhesive? It was called Sticky Strip, and it had no forgiveness. Once it went down, you were done. And we were using it on a project, and somebody messed up. And I thought, okay, what if? And I pulled out my heat tool. Like, oh my goodness. So since then, I've learned it's great for loosening adhesive. So we'll start with, I've got 4 different ones. Here's the Snail Adhesive. And if you, especially after it dries and sits for a couple days, trying to get this apart, it can be tricky. Now, this hasn't been down that long. I just did it before the video. So at this point, what I'm using here is my Take Your Pick tool with that spatula end. I can get between these layers and see if I can get them separated. Okay, so like I said, after a couple days, you start pulling and that doesn't happen. So that's when I would pull out my heat tool. But there we go, not bad at all. Okay, and let's try. Okay, now I'm starting to tear it. That's when the heat tool, I don't know if you could hear if I heard the tear. This is when the heat tool would come in. I'm going to put it on the highest setting because I want it to be good and intense. Look at that. It just came apart. So fantastic. So now let's move on and try some adhesives that are stronger. On this, I have the Stampin' Dimensionals. If I start pulling on this, the other thing is your cardstock, because sometimes you don't want to restamp it, you just didn't put it down well, that you can bend it, and that's not a good look. So instead, let's just take our heat tool and warm this up and gently pull. So again, we don't want to bend it. Okay, look at that. And so this is just coming apart. It's amazing. Again, keep your hands out of the way because it's very intense heat. I even did one in the center. Yeah, like I said, warm. Ouchie. All right, let's put this down for a second and work on it. There we go. And so we can salvage some of our work and our layers with using this for the heat tool, or using the heat tool to loosen that adhesive. There we go. Very, very nice. All right, so it's a little bit bent, but what it's not bent, the heat warped this a little bit. I can take my bone folder and straighten that back out. What you don't want is a bend that causes a crease that you can't just smooth back out. You know what I'm talking about. And all right, so far working really well with the first two. So let's try mini glue dots, really strong. Again, we could try to get in here, see if we can get those. Oh my goodness. And I've done it, and then I'll tell you what happens. I end up tearing the cardstock. Now, if I tear underneath and I'm going to cover it back up, that's okay, but I'll end up tearing out beyond what you would see. So that's not a good look. So again, keeping our fingers out of the way. And we'll just do a little bit at a time. Take our heat tool. Oh, there we go. Start to loosen that one. And the glue, oh, nice. Because the glue dots are extra sticky, and they're fantastic for whenever anything has a texture to it. Oh, these are just coming apart wonderfully, but it wasn't going to come apart that easily with just using that spatula end. Oh, look at that. Nothing's even warped. Loving it, aren't you? For our last one, we'll use the tear and tape adhesive to see how well the heat gun does. Do you remember the sticky strip, the red line tape? It was really good and super strong, but it slowed you down because you had to cut it. Where this, you just literally, it's called tear and tape. You tear it off. Wonderful. And the backing comes off a lot easier. With the red line sticky strip, it would cling to you. Anyway, so really love this stuff. But it's so strong that it's really hard to get a project apart without tearing it up. So let's go back to our heat tool. And we'll put on that second setting. And slowly let it do it. Applying a little bit of pressure while keeping my fingers out of the way at the same time. Oh, there we go. Look. It's releasing. If I did it the full length, because anytime I do a 3D project, is mostly when I use this because there's a lot of pressure. You're doing a box or whatever, things aren't lying flat. That's when I pull this out. Oh, look at that. That came apart without tearing either cardstock. So the heat tool is for more than embossing, which of course is wonderful. But when you can start salvaging some projects and, cardstock and your time, what a wonderful tool this turns out to be. We can find more uses. And outside of your craft room, great for getting labels off of jars and all of that. Again, super, super hot. So keep your fingers out of the way, but that's what makes it a wonderful tool for embossing and in the craft room and other rooms too. Melting embossing powder for fabulous handmade cards is still my favorite use, but boy, it sure comes in handy for loosening adhesive. And if you'd like more of my stamping tips, well, I invite you to subscribe to the Stampers Insider. It's your free stamping source for inspiration, information, and ideas. Just go now to www.thestampersinsider.com to subscribe. I'm Shelley Godbee, teaching you how to create hand-stamped smiles. Thanks for watching.